Today, we're going to count down the top 15 Halloween video games. Now, these games are not just for one system, they're for multiple systems over the years. These are just some of my favorites I like to play around Halloween. Number 15, Ghosts and Goblins for Nintendo. The story for Ghosts and Goblins is your typical save the girl from the ghouls deal. But the real star of the show is the game's epic level of difficulty. Now, Capcom has made some hard games for the NES library, Mega Man, Little Nemo, and Street Fighter 2010, just to name a few. But none take the cake quite like Ghosts and Goblins. Each enemy has their own erratic pattern and requires a unique method for defeat, while the levels are laid out in a way that blind jumps and unavoidable weapons downgrades must be tested for progression. If that's not enough to test your might, you must also complete the entire game twice for the proper ending. Number 14, Zombie Ate My Neighbors, Super Nintendo. In Zombie Ate My Neighbors, the players must rescue a certain amount of neighbors from a never-ending horde of vampires, mummies, zombies, Martians, chainsaw maniacs, and many other horrifying monsters. You get to use all kinds of crazy weapons, like a bazooka, a water gun, a lawnmower, explosive soda cans, popsicles, tomatoes, silverware, and all sorts of goofy gadgets. The game plays from an over-the-top camera angle, where the player must unlock sections of the level by different methods, so it sort of works as both a shoot-'em-up and a problem-solving exercise. Zombie Ate My Neighbors is a wacky parody of the horror genre that manages to be both fun and challenging. Even with the friend in co-op mode, the game can be a little difficult. The game was also released on a Sega Genesis, but the Super Nintendo port is far superior. Number 13, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Nintendo. In A Nightmare on Elm Street, players will control teenagers on the Elm Street, navigating through various buildings to search for Freddy Krueger's bones. The idea was to gather them all and destroy them, putting Freddy's spirit to rest once for all. Inspired by the film, players are able to fall asleep in the game, then enter the nightmare world where the enemies are more dangerous. Perhaps the game's most unique quality was the ability to offer 4-player support, letting 4 players take on Freddy Krueger at the same time. Players could also gain special dream powers to use against Freddy, such as magic and throne shurikens. The game can get a little tense when Freddy's Coming suddenly appears on the screen. Despite the tacky trademark symbol after Freddy's name, this game is a good playthrough and can be challenging, especially when playing by yourself. Number 12, Castlevania Lords of Shadow, Xbox One. Castlevania Lords of Shadow takes place at the end of days. The Earth has been threatened by a dark force called the Lords of Shadow. Across the Shadowland, the souls of the dead are unable to find peace, and creatures of evil roam free, wreaking chaos and death upon the living. Gabriel is a member of the Brotherhood of Light, an elite group of holy knights who protects and defends the innocent against the supernatural. His beloved wife was murdered by the evil forces of darkness, and now her soul is trapped for eternity. Neither living nor dead, she soon realizes the horrifying truth of what is at stake, and now guides Gabriel to his destiny. Gabriel must now travel the world, defeating the evil tyrants in order to use the powers to bring balance back to the world. Armed with the combat cross, the world's last hope must encounter the 3 factions of the Lords of Shadow and end their unholy rule. Number 11, Splatterhouse 2, Sega Genesis. In 1988, the side-scrolling beat-em-up arcade game Splatterhouse was released. Inspired by slasher films of the era, the story is set in a spooky mansion filled with horrendous creatures. Players take control of Rick Taylor, a college student gifted with superhuman strength after a magical hockey mask bonds with its face. Although Splatterhouse was never ported to the Sega Genesis, its official sequel Splatterhouse 2 was, featuring gameplay similar to the original. Rick heads back to the mansion to save Jennifer. The game is rather violent and gory compared to the other games on the system. As far as gameplay goes, Splatterhouse 2 is a pretty standard game. You move through the levels from left to right, avoiding traps and killing enemies before reaching a boss. Along the way, you can pick up weapons that allow you to kill things in interesting ways, such as splatting them on the walls and smashing them into the ground. The weapons often get dropped as you transition between stages though, leaving you to just jumps, kicks, and punches for the most part. Splatterhouse 2 is one of the most memorable 16-bit horror games of them all. Number 10. Dead Space, Xbox 360. One of the best new horror franchises of last generation, Dead Space ultimately became an excellent trilogy, but it really peaked in its first effort. A space mining vessel that goes dark discovers a nauseating and violent threat. No one who has played could ever forget the vile necromorphs in their many forms, and the game's superb use of audio still holds up even to this day. Now it's a shame with EA not seeming interested in something as survivor horror, we may have already seen the last of this unforgettable series, but it still stands the titans of the genre forever, and is still an excellent trilogy. Number 9. The Walking Dead, Xbox One. The Walking Dead is rather grim. The video game is part of a series of titles. They are somewhat linked together. Of course, the series is connected to The Walking Dead television and comic books. Although prior knowledge about The Walking Dead content is not required before jumping into this dark journey, players step into the role of Lee Everett, who ends up becoming a father figure to a small girl named Clementine. When the zombie apocalypse suddenly breaks out, there is a series of episodes to play through in this point-and-click style adventure. Now, the choices you pick will affect the outcome of the story. There are a number of installments available which continue this incredible series. Number 8. Friday the 13th, Nintendo. Now I know what you're thinking. The game is universally panned by just about everybody. Now I'm not saying that Friday the 13th is necessarily a great game, but it can be fun, and it can be extremely difficult. If you're not familiar with the game, it is a rough translation of the early Friday the 13th franchise, and it follows a team of camp counselors as they attempt to survive random attacks from the horror icon Jason Voorhees. Many point out that the crappiest weapons, stiff controls, and an overall sense of not knowing where you are. But all of these are intentionally put into the game just to give the players a sense of helplessness and confusion. All this, as well as random appearances by Jason, makes the game very challenging. The game certainly hasn't aged well, but if you're in the mood for some old school fun, you might want to check this one out. Number 7. Super Ghouls and Ghosts, Super Nintendo. Super Ghouls and Ghosts is more or less an updated remake of its previous Nintendo incarnation, Ghosts and Goblins, except its legendary difficult level has been scaled back a bit. That's not to say that Super Ghouls and Ghosts is a walk in the park. You'll still be murdered by demons and hazards alike, but just not as often as before. As we assume the graphics are better, the music is better, and the controls are far more forgiving than Ghosts and Goblins. But this time around, Arthur also has an upgradable armor that in turn upgrades his weapons and adding another dimension to the franchise. Unfortunately, you still have to beat this game twice to get the proper ending. Number 6. Alien Isolation, Xbox One. Licensed video games are hardly good, never mind great. And licensed horror games have been especially bad over the years. Now, Alien Isolation is a terrifying exception to the rule, telling a new story in Ridley Scott's famous universe. Isolation manages to take so much of what makes the first film a classic and bring it over to video games. The game is set between Aliens 1 and 2. The story is about Amanda Ripley, who goes into space to find her mother, who has vanished so many years ago. Now, with a cunning xenomorph AI, players must learn to outsmart one of pop culture's most intelligent predators. It's truly an intense game and a great entry into the Alien franchise. Number 5. Dead by Daylight, Xbox One. In Dead by Daylight, one player takes control of a deranged killer, and you must hunt down and kill all 4 players. Or you can control a player and try to survive. Controlling either can be fun and challenging. Some of the DLC killers include characters like Michael Myers, Leatherface, Freddy Krueger, and Pig-faced killer inspired by Saw. As humans, players must activate multiple generators, while avoiding the superpowered stalker, creating an intense game of cat and mouse that doesn't let up until you're dead or free. Dead by Daylight's gameplay is evenly balanced to give the powerless survivors a chance at escaping each realm. The result is a solid multiplayer that's equal parts delightful and terrifying. It's not easy to turn a multiplayer game into an effective horror title, but Behavior Interactive found the right formula. Number 4. Super Castlevania 4, Super Nintendo. Super Castlevania 4 is the fourth entry in the series. The story is actually a retelling of the first Castlevania game, as Simon Belmont fights his way through hordes of zombies, skeletons, and those damn Medusa heads. He must make it to Dracula's castle to fight, you guessed it, the one and only Dracula. With Simon's whip, players can attack enemies in 8 directions. With the use of the control pad, by holding down the attack button, the whip will go limp and can be waved around with the control pad, which can be used to block projectiles. Back are all the franchise's standards like creepy music and classic horror villains, but now everything just seems to be supersized. Each level stands out on its own, with unique themes, monsters tailored to each setting, use of the Systems Mode 7 feature, so things never really get stale. Also, no more cheap deaths for Simon Belmont. The game's controls have been fine-tuned to damn near perfection, making this, to me, the best improvement for the series. Number 3. Ghostbusters, Xbox 360. Well, if you were a fan of the movies at all, you really need to play this game. This may be one of the best movie licensed games out there. The game's plot takes 2 years after the second movie. Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis actually wrote the script for this game. All of the original Ghostbuster actors returned to reprise their roles. The game is pretty much Ghostbusters 3. The plot, script, and voice acting holds up to the movies and is hilarious. The gameplay is very challenging and incredibly fun. You really get the feeling you always thought you'd get as a Ghostbuster. Blasting things with your proton pack, causing mayhem and destruction while bagging ghosts. The graphics and sound of the game are incredible, and the physics engine in the game is just downright fun. Ghostbusters the video game could have been an absolute failure, but it's not, besides some of the lip-sync voice acting at times, and some very difficult spikes. It triumphs overall, and all the hard work by everyone involved seems to have created something very magical in a game here. It's definitely one of my favorite games of last generation, and it has just been remastered for the Xbox One, PS4, and Nintendo Switch. Number 2. Friday the 13th, the game, Xbox One. The online multiplayer scare 'em up either puts you in the shaking boots of a screaming teenager trying to escape the masked killer, or Jason Voorhees himself on a good old murder spree. The fact you're being hunted by another player and not some faceless AI makes this a little more scarier, especially as Jason can't be stopped. He can be slowed down, but if he gets too close, your weak teenager bones don't stand a chance in hell. In 2017, developer Ilphonic gave players the chance to step into the Jason Voorhees boots, as well as those of his prey. With the release of Friday the 13th, the game, the multiplayer title found one player as Jason hunting down up to 7 other players in a gory version of hide and seek, with the counselors able to work together in an effort to overcome Jason's hunting powers, featuring dozens of memorable over-the-top kill animations by master special effects artist Tom Savini. Friday the 13th, the game, might actually be better than some of the movies. We're looking at you, Jason X. In number 1, Resident Evil 2 Remake, Xbox One. In January of 2019, fans were finally able to get their hands on a remake of Resident Evil 2 that for the most part was the same experience that they originally had when the game came out in 1998. While Capcom didn't alter the experience, there were some slight adjustments. For example, the game dropped the fixed camera angle and tank controls and instead of offered modern controls. This included an over-the-shoulder view with traditional third-person controls. Despite these changes, the game was still a horror hit, where players once again stepped into the roles of both Leon Kennedy, a rookie cop, and a college student named Claire Redfield. Both end up in the Raccoon City shortly after the launch of a virus known as a T-virus. This has created a wasteland for the city, which became infected by the undead, among other hostile creatures that became altered through biological weapons. So this has been my top 15 games I like to play around Halloween. What are your favorite games? I would love to see your list below. If you like my video, please hit the thumbs up button for your support. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.